I never thought a sunny morning in my quiet cabin could turn into a full-blown nightmare, but that's exactly what happened. I was sipping my coffee, watching the mist roll over the trees, when I saw her car. The same car I had hoped I'd never see again. It was HOA Karen, the infamous troublemaker of our neighborhood, and she was heading straight for my property. My heart sank. Just a few years ago, this land was nothing but overgrown weeds and stubborn roots. Most people would have walked away, but I saw potential. I built my dream, a sturdy, secluded cabin that seemed to rise naturally out of the forest, almost like it belonged there. I even called it my fortress, and for years, it protected me from the outside chaos, especially from people like Karen. But today, she wasn't coming for a casual visit. No, this was something bigger. She had a clipboard, a glare sharper than broken glass, and a new mission, to buy my land. Apparently, the HOA had decided that my little slice of paradise didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic, and Karen, now their self-appointed land negotiator, was on a mission to take control. She parked with precision, marched up to my gate, and knocked like she owned the place. I opened the door, trying to mask my nerves with a calm smile. "Morning, Karen," I said, though my voice cracked slightly. Her eyes narrowed, scanning every corner of my cabin. Every detail I had poured blood, sweat, and tears into. "I hear you own a little property out here," she said, her voice oozing with false charm. "I'd like to make an offer." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just trying to negotiate. She was trying to intimidate me. If I sold, she'd set a precedent, sending a warning to anyone else who dared to live freely on their own land. I knew I couldn't back down. My cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was my sanctuary, my statement that I wouldn't be bullied. And over the next hour, Karen unleashed every tactic she had learned from HOA meetings: charm, threats, legal jargon, and even subtle insults. But with each word, I felt my resolve grow stronger. I had prepared for this. My cabin wasn't just a home. It was a fortress in every sense of the word. By the time she left, red-faced and muttering, I realized something important. Karen had underestimated me. And more importantly, she didn't know the full extent of what I was capable of. She thought this would be an easy win. But she had just stepped into a war she wasn't ready for. After Karen's visit, I spent the next few days surveying every inch of my property. I had always considered my cabin a fortress, but now it felt more like a battleground. I knew she would return, probably with more tricks, more threats, and maybe even legal action. So I began fortifying my little sanctuary, not with walls or weapons, but with strategy, preparation, and the element of surprise. I started by documenting everything: property boundaries, permits, and improvements I had made over the years. Every nail, every post, every improvement mattered. If she tried to claim my land legally, I would be ready. I also made sure neighbors knew I wasn't intimidated. Word spreads fast in small communities, and I had allies who despised Karen as much as I did. Then came the cabin upgrades. I reinforced the gates, improved visibility from my porch, and even planted thorny bushes along vulnerable paths. Not to be paranoid, but to send a clear message. This wasn't an ordinary property, and I wasn't an ordinary homeowner. I wanted Karen to know that she couldn't intimidate me without facing consequences. But Karen didn't wait for me to finish my preparations. A week later, she returned with a friend, a lawyer this time. Their plan was obvious: pressure, confusion, and hope I would back down. They started walking the property line, taking notes, and muttering about zoning, violations, and community regulations. I stayed calm, watching from my porch, letting them think they were in control. "You know, it's just easier to sell," Karen said, her tone dripping with faux reasonableness. "We could make this simple." I smiled, knowing she had no idea what she was getting into. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but this land isn't for sale." Her eyes flashed, and I realized she had crossed a line. She had underestimated my determination. It wasn't just about land anymore. It was about principle. My cabin represented freedom, independence, and resilience. Giving in now would mean letting Karen and every HOA tyrant dictate my life. She didn't just want my property. She wanted control, and I wasn't about to hand it over. By the end of that tense afternoon, Karen and her lawyer left with their egos bruised. But I knew this was far from over. The fortress cabin had stood strong once, but the real test was yet to come. I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The next encounter could escalate, and I needed to be ready for anything. Just when I thought things couldn't get more intense, HOA Karen decided to take her tactics to a whole new level. A simple visit or legal threat wasn't enough for her anymore. She wanted to make an example out of me. That morning, I noticed bright orange stakes appearing along the edge of my property. Survey markers. A warning that the HOA was plotting something bigger. I grabbed my binoculars and watched as Karen returned, this time with a small crew. They didn't say much. They just measured, photographed, and whispered. I felt a surge of adrenaline. She wasn't just trying to intimidate me anymore. She was building a case. But the funny thing about Karen is that she always underestimated one thing. Me. I had spent years turning this cabin into more than just a home. It was my fortress, my sanctuary, and now my battlefield. I decided it was time to fight smarter, not just harder. I began documenting every interaction meticulously. I even installed a few discreet cameras around the perimeter. Not because I wanted to spy, but because I needed proof of harassment if this escalated legally. Karen might have thought she was clever, but I was prepared to play a longer game. The real escalation came that evening. I was sitting on my porch when a loud knock echoed through the cabin. Karen, alone this time. She stepped up to the gate, her eyes cold, her smile sharp. "You're making this difficult," she said. "Maybe I need to involve the whole HOA board." I paused, measuring my words. "You're welcome to try," I replied evenly. "But this cabin isn't going anywhere." Her reaction was priceless. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone living quietly off the grid. She glared, muttered something about rules and community standards, and left. But I knew this wouldn't be the last confrontation. Karen thrived on control and conflict. The next step would likely be legal threats, complaints, or worse, anything to make me buckle. That night, I walked through my cabin, inspecting every corner, every lock, every window. I realized that the fortress wasn't just about physical barriers, it was about mindset. Karen could try all she wanted, but as long as I stayed calm, strategic, and prepared, she couldn't touch me. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was slowly shifting. By dawn, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Karen may have escalated, but she had also revealed her weaknesses: impatience, arrogance, and underestimation of her opponent. And I was ready. The next encounter wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about showing Karen that some fortresses aren't meant to be conquered. The tension had been building for weeks. Karen's visits, her threats, her legal mumbo-jumbo, it all led to this. I knew she was planning one last move. The ultimate attempt to intimidate me into surrendering my land. That morning, the forest was eerily quiet, as if even nature was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen. It started with a knock on the gate, louder and more deliberate than before. I opened the door slowly, scanning the horizon. Karen was there, flanked by two more people carrying what looked like HOA paperwork and cameras. Her face was set, a mix of frustration and determination. "We're here to finalize the process," she said, voice sharp and controlled. "You have no choice. The HOA demands it." I smiled calmly, knowing she had underestimated my preparation. "I've been waiting for this," I replied, "and I hope you're ready to see why this cabin is more than just wood and nails." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting me to panic. Instead, I calmly invited them onto the property, guiding them past the reinforced gates, past the thorny bushes, and through the winding path that led to my cabin. Every step was deliberate. I wanted them to see, to feel, that this was not a place to intimidate someone lightly. Then came the proof. I laid out every document, every permit, every improvement I had made. I showed them the boundaries, the survey reports, and the local regulations that clearly supported my ownership. Karen tried to argue, tried to twist words, but my preparation left no room for manipulation. She realized, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't going to be easy. As the hours passed, the tension shifted. Karen's energy began to waver. Her threats became weaker, her confidence cracking. I stood firm, calm, and collected, the embodiment of resilience. It wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about protecting my home, my independence, and my peace of mind. By sunset, Karen and her crew left, their egos bruised and their plan foiled. I watched them drive away, feeling a surge of triumph. My fortress cabin had stood against intimidation, manipulation, and relentless pressure, and it had won. More than that, it had proven something to me, that preparation, courage, and determination are stronger than any threat. As I stood on the porch, the wind rustling through the trees, I realized that the battle had changed me. Karen may come and go, and the HOA may try to interfere again, but this cabin was my sanctuary, my fortress, and my statement: some places and some people aren't meant to be conquered. If you love this story and want to see more wild HOA Karen moments, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment telling us what you'd do if this happened to you.